Dan Emmert, lead agronomist at Advanced Agrilytics, joins us today diving into the topic of the race to Canopy. Dan, thanks for being here. How are you doing today?
I am doing great. The sun is shining, soil temps are warming up, and people are getting back in the field, so it's a very good day.
It's an exciting time. Dan, what's been your assessment of the growing season so far? We saw many farmers get an early start to planting, some holding off until the 1st of May. What's been your report from the field so far?
So for me, it's kind of like deja vu back to 2020, except we don't have to wear masks. So we've had really good soil conditions. We could almost say they were perfect down in Southwest Indiana and Kentucky, except for the temperatures. So soil temps hovering around 50 or cooler. Some people decided to jump out and get a really good start on planting there that April 10th through the 20th. And other people got a lot of field work done, whether it was tillage or burn down or putting on ammonia. With that said, we probably, close to 80% planted on beans, somewhere around 60 on corn, but this corn has taken around 2 weeks to emerge. And so with that and the cool temperatures, we're just seeing any of the little differences in that seed trench and furrow are leading to differences in emergence. So, and really probably the three big things that are making a difference. One would be that seed bed prep. So whether it was last fall or this spring, if that tillage pass brought up some clods, there's that created kind of some variation in seed to soil contact. And so where that seed was maybe laying in some drier soil, it took a little bit longer to emerge. The second would have been just residue. So again, whether it was out of the back of the combine last fall or this spring, where the row cleaners weren't doing a great job moving the residue out of the way, we've been seeing that make a difference of up to 8 degrees in soil temperature. And when we're so cool and that soil temp's right around 50, that's making a big difference in how quick that seed gets out of the ground. And then finally, just position and landscape in the field, whether it's, the slope, the south facing and east facing slopes are warming up quicker and getting up quicker. And the darker soils are coming up quicker as well. So, quite a bit of unevenness within the row and across the field. But it looks like all of those seeds are still healthy and viable. And with as cool as it's been, they'll probably only be about a leaf stage behind.
Well, let's keep talking about that next biggest challenge, getting the crop out of the ground and off to a strong start. Dan, what are some of the things that growers need to keep in mind this early in the season?
Well, I think one of the big things is paying attention to the details when you're making any tillage passes or planter passive. The reason we're going out there is to make sure we're putting those seeds in the best position we can to succeed. So making sure we're not working the field too wet, breaking down those clods so we can get a good planter ride and even seed depth, getting out of the planter to check and make sure we've got good down pressure, uniform depth, not creating any sidewall smear, and moving the residue out of the way and getting the furrow closed. Those are failure to pay attention to those little details are what I've seen causing a lot of the issues with emergence. Probably one of the other things that I anticipate seeing a big difference in is the use of starter to really set that crop up and get it off to a really good start once it's out of the ground. So, and with that, I'm talking about 2x2 with a good dose of nitrogen and also some sulfur in there as well.
Let's talk about moisture just a bit and how the crops utilize that moisture and what you're seeing in the field right now when it comes to whether some areas have enough moisture in the soil or if there's still some dry pockets out there.
Yeah, so down, and I'm kind of US 50. in the Vincennes, Washington area, we're in pretty good shape as far as moisture goes. We've kind of caught just enough rain here and there without having anything too heavy. I know, well, as we move further north into Illinois, they're getting really dry. But as we think about those planting conditions, we want to make sure that we're planting down into moisture. And if you're in one of those pockets that's really dry, maybe consider parking the tillage tool and no-tilling into bean stubble, or being as conservative as you can with that tillage. Because really at this stage, that corn seed needs to imbibe about 30 to 35% of its moisture in that kernel weight before it can come up. And if we don't have that moisture, it's not going to come up.
Let's talk about ways to enhance overall plant health in this race to canopy, Dan.
Yeah. So once the crop emerges, we consider it a race to canopy. And the reason we want to get that canopy closed, there's a couple reasons. One is that once the canopy closes, we're being the most efficient we can with that sunlight capture. There's only so much sunlight that we're going to get per year. And if it's hitting the ground instead of hitting those leaves, well, we're not very efficient with that. Another thing is, as we get a bigger plant and we close that canopy, and we're being more efficient with photosynthesis, that is more sucrose that we are storing in that plant to either drive future growth or be stored to be reallocated later for yield. So that's one reason. Another big reason is water use efficiency. You think about it, a corn plant uses about 70 to 80% of the water that it takes up to cool itself off. So when we close that canopy, we're doing a couple things. One, rather than the sun hitting that soil, warming it up, and then losing that water up into the atmosphere via evaporation, we close that canopy, we keep the soil cool, and a cool canopy is better for corn growth anyway. But we're also keeping that moisture in the soil to where the roots can take it up and the canopy can cool itself off. And the other thing, as that plant is taking up moisture, well, guess what? It's taking up all those nutrients that are in the soil solution as well. So by closing that canopy earlier in the season, we're really setting the foundation for optimal crop success. And, the other thing to think about too, you have a bigger plant early, that's more nutrients that we have taken up and pulled out of the soil and put into the plant that we can either use to drive growth processes or, again, store and reallocate for future growth and future yield.
As we close down the segment here, Dan, any final thoughts for growers as they look to get this crop off to its quickest start?
Well, I think, again, it comes down to, we always talk about at Advanced Agrilytics, the environment and the mechanism and how those things interact to drive crop growth and crop yield. So as we think about this race to canopy and setting up a solid foundation, think through the amount of residue that you have. Think through the organic matter and how much environmental contribution of N you're going to get. And that's one of the things that we help our growers do is work through that and come up with the best plan possible, not just on a field by field basis, but in an environment by environment basis to make sure that every acre has a solid foundation to succeed, because we know every single field is going to encounter risk at some point. And our goal is to set up a solid foundation and mitigate that risk.
Dan, thanks for coming on the program today. It's been great. Thanks a lot for the insight.
Thank you, Brent. Stay safe and have a great spring.
Agronomic expertise, cutting-edge research, unbiased recommendations. Read the latest agronomic blog at advancedagrilytics.com.